Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we skip the noise and go straight to the knowledge. Today, we are strapping ourselves into the world of a band that is, well, by definition, an impossibility. A band that is entirely fictional, yet somehow more real, more enduring, and, yeah, wildly successful than most human groups. Gorillaz.
It really is the ultimate creative paradox, isn't it? We're talking about a project that, from its very first chord, was designed as this high-concept shell,
Right.
allowing these two creative titans to critique pop culture while at the same time becoming this absolute powerhouse of collaboration, concept art, and musical spectacle.
Exactly. So our mission today is a really exhaustive deep dive. We're going into their entire biography, the sprawling discography. We want to try and excavate the creative DNA of this constantly shape-shifting virtual band.
Yeah, understand the mechanisms, right, behind its constant reinvention over, what is it now, a quarter century?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the core question we're hunting down is maybe the most fascinating one in modern music history, I think. How did a project born from just sheer frustration with, like, the formulaic manufacturing of commercial pop music, how did that become this genre-defying organization? An organization that consistently pushes the boundaries of musical collaboration, narrative, and crucially, what a live show even means in this digital age.
Okay, let's nail the definition right up front, just for anyone who's maybe only seen the cartoons,
Good idea.
Gorillaz was created in London, 1998. The creators were two figures who had already kind of defined major segments of British culture.
Absolutely. Musician Damon Albarn, who everyone knew as the frontman of Blur.
Big time.
And artist Jamie Hewlett, the sort of visionary behind the countercultural hit Tank Girl.
And the band itself is structurally built around these four fictional members, 2D on vocals and keyboards.
The blue-haired one.
Yep. Murdoch Nichols on bass. The dodgy green one.
Yeah.
Noodle on guitar, keyboards, vocals, and Russell Hobbs on drums. But here's the organizational twist, and this is key. While this virtual lineup is the fixed face of the project, Damon Albarn is the singular, permanent musical contributor and composer behind the scenes. It's a structure literally built for fluidity.
Built for change. Okay, let's unpack this creation story then. Part 1. Creation and the debut explosion, 1998-2002. It's not exactly a tale of mutual admiration, is it?
No, not at all. It's founded on, antagonism, shared misery, shared boredom. It really was a clash of titans that somehow worked.
So how do they even meet?
Well, Albarn and Hewlett initially met way back in 1990. It was during an interview Hewlett was doing for, I think, Deadline magazine about Albarn's band Blur.
Okay.
And according to the sources, Hewlett's first impression of this, hyper-confident Britpop star was not flattering at all.
Oh.
He reportedly thought Albarn was, and I quote, "RC, a wanker."
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Not exactly the foundation for a lifelong partnership.
Not immediately, no. So you fast forward 7 years, and they find themselves sharing a flat in West London, 1997. And they were both in this state of creative and personal flux, which, let's be honest, is often when the best art gets made.
True. So what was going on?
Well, Hewlett had recently ended a relationship with Jane Oliver, who was Blur guitarist Graham Coxon's ex-girlfriend.
Ah, okay. Bit messy.
And Albarn had just split from Justine Frischman of Elastica, a huge relationship in the Britpop scene. So you've got these two guys kind of hiding out, creatively exhausted maybe from their high-profile real-life band commitment.
And just bored living together.
Exactly. And that shared state of, let's call it ennui, is where the spark hit them. The famous MTV revelation.
Right, I've heard about this. They were just watching music television.
For hours. And Hewlett famously described the experience as being a bit like hell. He said there's nothing of substance there.
Because the screen was just flooded with glossy, interchangeable pop acts. Boy bands, mostly.
Totally. That was the peak boy band era, late 90s.
And that is the seed of the entire Gorillaz idea. Albarn looked at that explosion of highly manufactured, predictable pop and saw, well, a vacuum. He decided, well, let's make a manufactured band, but let's make it kind of interesting.
Right. So Gorillaz became this satirical commentary on manufactured pop, but by kind of weaponizing the manufacturing process itself.
Yeah, creating a critique, using the very tools, the very idea they were criticizing. Animation personas.
But isn't that a contradiction? If the point was to critique manufactured pop, didn't they immediately contradict themselves by creating a, totally fictional manufactured band?
But that was the brilliant structural move, wasn't it? The fiction, the fact that it wasn't Damon Albarn standing there, granted him a level of musical liberation he probably hadn't experienced since the very early days of Blur.
Okay, explain that a bit more, because this is really important regarding Albarn's career trajectory, right?
Definitely. By the late 90s, Blur was deeply, deeply entrenched in the Britpop sound. And for anyone who might not recall, that genre was fundamentally built on, 1960s British guitar pop.
Kinks, Beatles.
Yeah, blending elements of bands like the Kinks and the Beatles with this sort of modern cynicism. But it could be musically restrictive.
Yeah.
Albarn had this distinct sound, this persona with Blur, but he felt creatively stifled by it.
So Gorillaz was his escape hatch.
Totally. He famously said he had a lot of rhythms I never thought I could use with Blur. Suddenly, he wasn't constrained by a genre or by 4 human band members with their own established history and expectations.
Right.
And the debut album, Gorillaz, in 2001, just reflects this freedom completely. It's incredibly eclectic. You've got dark trip-hop, dub, Latin influences, funk, stuff that just wouldn't fit on a Blur record back then.
And crucially, he knew he couldn't execute that kind of eclectic sound purely within a sort of British context, right? He needed outside help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key partnership here was with the American hip-hop producer, Dan the Automator Nakamura.
Ah, yes. They'd worked together before, hadn't they?
They had on the Deltron 3030 project, which was this amazing conceptual hip-hop supergroup.
Right. So Nakamura comes in.
He was brought in after Albarn had finished maybe about half the album, apparently. Yeah. And he provided that critical hip-hop grounding, gave it focus.
And he brought his own crew with him.
Yeah, he subsequently brought in his key collaborators from Deltron 3030. The rapper Del the Funky Homo Sapien.
Who became Del the Ghost.
Exactly. On tracks like the massive hit Clint Eastwood, and also DJ Kid Koala, who contributed all the turntables and scratching. It was a statement from the off, The musical core was hybrid, cross-continental, genre-agnostic right from the start.
And this debut, against maybe some expectations, proved the concept was wildly viable commercially.
Oh, massively. Powered by Clint Eastwood, which was just inescapable that year.
Totally.
The album went triple platinum in the UK, double platinum across Europe, and ended up selling over 7 million copies worldwide. It surprised everyone who maybe wrote it off as just a novelty side project.
But that huge initial commercial success led to maybe the strangest artistic choice, at least initially. The early live phase, that called Phase 1.
Ah, yeah, the hidden band.
Their initial touring strategy involved the actual musicians, including Albarn, remember, one of the biggest frontmen in Britain at the time, playing completely obscured, hidden behind this giant projection screen showing Hewlett's visuals.
That just sounds creatively punishing.
Yeah.
They were intentionally creating this total wall between the performer and the audience.
Yeah. Making the concept and the visual art the undisputed star.
Must have driven Albarn crazy.
It absolutely led to genuine friction. Albarn later described the experience, noting that for someone who had just spent 10 years out front being a frontman with Blur,
right,
being hidden in the dark like that was a really weird experience. We're talking real frustration here. He apparently had such a difficult time some nights, he said he just wanted to get a knife and just cut the screen and stick my head through.
Wow. That one quote just tells you everything, doesn't it? About the tension right at the heart of the band. It's Albarn, the human performer, versus the concept, the artifice.
Yeah. He literally has to fight the screen, the barrier of his own making to reach the audience. Amazing.
Okay, so that brings us to part 2. Darker themes and evolving spectacle. Roughly 2005, 2012. The huge success of the debut meant this wasn't just a side gig anymore, right?
No way. It demanded a deeper commitment. And the second album, Demon Days, which came out in 2005, came partly out of this necessity to prove it wasn't just a fluke.
Right, gotta prove it's real.
Hewlett actually confirmed they continued Gorillaz precisely to prove the project was not a gimmick. A second blockbuster album would legitimize the entire creative model.
And conceptually, they went much, much darker this time compared to the debut.
Oh, yeah. Albarn had been inspired by this train journey he took through impoverished rural China. And apparently the sheer scale of the global inequality and pollution he witnessed there really informed the entire project.
So he framed it as a concept album.
He did. He described Demon Days as a concept album telling the story of the world in a state of night, a much heavier, more foreboding thematic focus than the first record.
And this conceptual shift, it was paired with a major production overhaul too, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Albarn recognized he needed a different sound architect for this darker vibe, and he enlisted Danger Mouse Brian Burton.
Ah, Danger Mouse. How did that come about?
Albarn heard his seminal mashup, the Grey Album, which brilliantly blended Jay-Z's Black Album with the Beatles' White Album.
Right, that was huge.
It was a critical choice, bringing in Danger Mouse. He brought this modern, atmospheric hip-hop sensibility, but also a kind of cinematic quality.
Any click?
Instantly, by all accounts. Burton and Albarn found immediate affinity. They connected on these shared influences that span decades, things like the cinematic scores of Ennio Morricone and classic psychedelic pop rock. Apparently, they pushed each other creatively, too. Burton was schooling Albarn on contemporary hip-hop, and Albarn was schooling Burton on British punk and new wave, kind of a musical exchange program.
And the collaboration just paid off massively.
Tremendously. Demon Days debuted at #1 in the UK. It massively outperformed the debut album commercially, going 6 times platinum in the UK, double platinum in the US. It was huge.
And the lead single, Feel Good Inc., featuring De La Soul.
Oh, that was a monster hit. A landmark track. It topped Billboard's alternative songs chart for 8 straight weeks.
8 weeks?
Yeah. And it won the band their first Grammy for Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals. Gorillaz were now undeniably a global phenomenon.
The success was undeniable. But the real technical talking point of Phase 2, I think, was the live experience. It moved from hiding the musicians to this massive technological spectacle.
Yeah, designed to make the cartoon characters seem real.
So how did that evolve from the screen?
Well, the Demon Days live residency in 2005 offered a kind of compromise first. The touring musicians were visible this time, but only as silhouettes.
Oh, okay.
They were deliberately obscured by lighting, with Hewlett's visuals projected up above them, so it showed the audience the human musicians were there, but without making them the visual focus. Still keeping the animation central.
But then came the holograms, right? Or perceived holograms.
Exactly. The true technological feat came later that year at the 2005 MTV Europe Music Awards, and then even bigger at the 48th Annual Grammy Awards in early 2006.
That Grammy performance with Madonna.
That's the one. The virtual band members appeared as if they were actually performing on stage alongside Madonna using this technology called Musion eyeliner.
Okay, so we need to dive into that tech a bit. It wasn't actually holograms like Star Wars, right?
No, not true holography. It's a sophisticated projection system. It uses this massive, highly reflective, transparent foil screen, or sometimes glass, placed on the stage floor, angled up towards the audience.
Right.
And it reflects a high-definition image projected onto it from below, or sometimes from the sides. It creates this really convincing illusion of a 3-dimensional character standing right there on stage. It's basically a modern version of an old Victorian stage trick called Pepper's Ghost.
Visually, it was revolutionary for the time. Jaw-dropping. But you mentioned it was restrictive for live music.
Highly restrictive. Albarn later expressed disappointment, specifically citing the extremely low volume level they had to maintain on stage.
Why was that?
Any high bass frequency, any significant vibration from the live band playing would physically disturb that delicate foil screen.
Okay.
And that would just mess up the illusion completely, as he put it. So the live band had to play really quietly, which isn't ideal for a rock show or a hip-hop performance.
Did they ever consider doing a full tour like that?
They absolutely looked into scaling it up for a full live holographic tour, but sources confirm the costs were just tremendous.
Yeah, I bet.
Plus, the logistical nightmare of moving such fragile, complex equipment around the world and those sound restrictions, it just made it totally unfeasible. They proved they could do it spectacularly, but realized it wasn't practical for a sustainable world tour.
Okay, so moving into Phase 3, we get Plastic Beach in 2010. Having maybe pushed the technological spectacle as far as it could go, Albarn seemed to shift focus again, this time really leaning into the thematic side.
Yeah, definitely. And the themes became much more explicitly environmentalist this time.
What was the specific inspiration?
It was profoundly immediate and physical marine pollution. Albarn apparently found loads of plastic washed up near his home in Devon on the English coast.
Right.
And that got him investigating the concept of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Yeah, that huge area in the ocean where all the plastic collects.
Exactly. It's this vast area where marine debris, mostly plastic, accumulates because of the ocean currents. It covers an enormous part of the Pacific. This led to this very grand, almost melancholic yet desolate thematic concept for the album centered on this broken artificial island made of trash.
And musically, how did that translate?
Musically, Albarn flew solo on production for this one. He actually called it the most pop record I've ever made.
Really? pop.
Yeah, moving into a distinctly electronic pop sound, but still weaving in lots of world music and jazz elements. It wasn't straightforward pop, but definitely had that polished electronic sheen.
And the scale of collaboration just exploded on this record, didn't it?
Oh, unprecedented. It reflected the kind of global, messy scope of the theme, maybe. It featured the largest cast of collaborators Gorillaz had ever assembled up to that point.
Like who?
Legends like Lou Reed, Snoop Dogg, Mos Def, the great Bobby Womack, even full orchestral contributions from the Syrian National Orchestra for Arabic music. It was huge.
And this expansion, it reflected Albarn's evolving idea of what Gorillaz even was, right?
Yeah. He started talking about Gorillaz less as just those 4 cartoon characters and more as an organization of people doing new projects.
Okay. Like a collective.
Exactly. This flexible framework meant he could work with this impossibly eclectic cast and justify it all under the umbrella of this constantly evolving fictional organization. It gave him total freedom.
And the tour for Plastic Beach, the Escape to Plastic Beach tour, that was monumental too.
It was. And critically, it was their first world tour where the touring band performed fully in view. No more silhouettes, no more screens hiding them. Yeah. And they often featured that huge cast of collaborators right there on stage with them. It was apparently a spectacular creative success. People loved the shows. But
there's always a but.
Albarn later described the tour, financially speaking, as being economically, it was a fucking disaster.
A disaster? Why exactly?
Yeah.
If the album did well, shouldn't the tour have been profitable?
Well, the disaster was purely down to logistics and the sheer cost of realizing that organization live on stage every night.
Bring all those collaborators.
Exactly. To maintain the artistic integrity of the album, to bring that huge sound to life, they had to hire and transport upwards of 50 musicians at any given time.
50?
Yeah, including horn sections, string players, and that constantly rotating roster of big-name guest stars like Bobby Womack or De La Soul flying in and out. Booking one massive rock band is expensive enough.
Right.
Booking a continuously shifting 50-person musical collective for a global world tour is nearly impossible to budget effectively. They clearly prioritized the artistic vision over the balance sheet on that one.
That chaos, that intensity, is then followed almost immediately by the fall later in 2010. Which is different again.
Very different. This was a direct product of that Plastic Beach tour experience. It was recorded entirely on Albarn's iPad during the North American leg of the tour.
On his iPad? Seriously?
Yep. He intended it as a kind of audio diary, a diary of my experience in America, he called it. And it was presented pretty much exactly as recorded with minimal overdubs. Raw, immediate, spontaneous.
And utterly dependent on the flexibility of the Gorillaz model, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't release that as a Blur album?
No way. It only worked under the Gorillaz banner.
Right.
But this period of intense creativity, the huge tour, the quick follow-up album, it led directly to burnout.
The fallout.
Yep. In 2012, the public announcement came that Albarn and Hewlett had fallen out, quite seriously it seemed, and future Gorillaz projects were declared unlikely. That marked the end of Phase 3.
What was the core issue? What did they fall out over?
Fundamentally, it seemed to boil down to that core tension again, the balance between the visual element and the musical element.
Okay.
Hewlett felt his creative contribution, the animation and the narrative, was being minimized on stage. He actually lamented that the screen they used for visuals seemed to get smaller every day, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
As Albarn brought more and more visible live collaborators, people like members of The Clash, Bobby Womack, onto the stage, Hewlett felt it shifted the audience's focus away from the animation, away from the fictional character.
And Albarn's side of it.
His view was kind of the inverse. He felt the music and the videos weren't working as well together on Plastic Beach. He felt the sheer scale of the music, the number of collaborators, had maybe overwhelmed the narrative that Hewlett was trying to maintain with the characters.
So a creative cross-purpose, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Each felt their side of the project wasn't being served properly by the other. It clearly needed a break, a hiatus, to solve it.
Okay. Part 3. Hiatus, digital acceleration, and reinvention. From 2017 to the present. So the great creative partnership seemed broken. But the hiatus was actually surprisingly brief in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it proved the power of the project, maybe, to draw them back together. The reconciliation apparently happened quite organically in 2014.
How?
It was at an after-party for one of Albarn's solo shows. They started talking, and according to Hewlett, they both agreed that the very public falling out had ultimately helped their relationship long-term. It cleared the air, let them reset.
Interesting. So the band returned in 2017 with Humans, their first album in 7 years. And the thematic context felt very immediate, very contemporary.
Oh, intensely so. And quite politically charged, actually.
Right. It was conceived as the soundtrack for a party for the end of the world. And Albarn specifically imagined a Donald Trump presidential win as this kind of dark fantasy narrative driving the album.
Which was almost prophetic, wasn't it?
Eerily so. Because the first track they released publicly from it, Hallelujah Money, featuring Benjamin Clementine, came out precisely on the day of Trump's inauguration in January 2017.
Wow.
Albarn saw it as a prophecy fulfilled in a bleak way. And the whole album acted as this kind of commentary on that globally fractured, uncertain moment.
And the production for Humans reflected that, too. It sounded very modern, very urban.
Yeah, it introduced two new crucial figures into the production team. There's the American hip-hop and house producer, The Twilight Tone.
Okay.
And significantly, Remy Kabaka Jr. Now, Remy had been the voice of Russell Hobbs since the very beginning, since 2000.
Right, the drummer.
Yeah. But now he was officially credited as a co-producer and listed as a percussionist, a core part of the creative team.
That's a big shift, recognizing the behind-the-scenes talent more formally.
Definitely. And while the album was generally well-received, had this definite modern hip-hop and R&B feel, some critics did quickly note that recurring tension.
Uh-oh, what now?
A diminished presence from Albarn in contrast to the abundance of featured artists, which, was almost the exact same point of creative friction that led to the fallout during the Plastic Beach era. Déjà vu.
So the very next album, the now in 2018, seemed like a direct response to that, almost defensive.
It really felt like it. Like The Fall, it was recorded quickly while they were touring Humans, trying to capture that spontaneity. Yeah. But more importantly, Albarn seemed to seek this dramatic return to a tighter focus. He explicitly said he wanted to make a Gorillaz album where I'm just singing for once, being very sort of in the world of 2D.
Bringing his own voice back to the forefront.
Exactly. And that decision resulted in a dramatically minimal collaborator list. Compared to the sprawling cast of Humans, that now only had 2 tracks featuring outside artists. The legendary George Benson and the Snoop Dogg popped up again briefly.
So it was Albarn deliberately recentering his own musical voice within the Gorillaz organization.
It seemed that way. And this phase also offered a perfect example of their fluid, almost fourth-wall-breaking narrative style.
How so?
Well, during the album cycle, the character Murdoch Nichols was fictionally imprisoned in the Gorillaz storyline.
Right, I remember that. Free Murdoch.
Yeah. And his substitute bassist in the band's videos and visuals was Ace.
Ace?
Ace from Cartoon Network's The Powerpuff Girls.
No way, really?
Seriously. The green-skinned leader of the Gangrene Gang. It just shows how effortlessly they can integrate existing pop culture IP into their own ever-evolving fictional universe. It's brilliant, really.
That's amazing. Okay, so this brings us to maybe the biggest structural reinvention yet, starting around 2020. The Song Machine era.
Yeah, this really challenged the whole idea of the album format itself. It felt like a direct recognition of this shift in how you, the listener, consume music today in the streaming age.
Oh, what did they do?
It was a clear acknowledgement of digital acceleration. Gorillaz moved away from those traditional 2-year album cycles and instead launched a web series.
A web series?
Yeah, releasing episodes, which were basically new singles paired with high-concept music videos roughly monthly. Albarn explained it explicitly, saying they were no longer kind of constrained to making albums. We can now make episodes in seasons.
Like a TV show model, but for music releases.
Exactly. An approach perfectly suited for the digital attention economy. Keep the content flowing constantly.
And this episodic format, presumably, allowed for even more immediate and diverse collaborations, showcasing the flexibility of the organization.
Totally. The range was incredible. We saw tracks dropping with everyone from the UK grime and punk scene, like Slow Tie and Slaves on Momentary Bliss,
right,
to the amazing Malian singer Fatoumata Diawara on Désolé, post-punk icon Peter Hook from New Order on Aries.
Wow, Peter Hook.
Yeah. And it all culminated in the album collecting these tracks, Song Machine, Season 1, Strange Time As, which itself featured absolute legends like Robert Smith of The Cure and Sir Elton John.
That's an insane lineup.
It was just this constant, unpredictable stream of new, high-quality content. It kept the band perpetually relevant, always something new happening.
But this highly successful phase, it wasn't entirely without controversy, was it? Something about NFTs.
Ah, yes, the NFT issue. In 2021, which was marking the debut album's 20th anniversary, the band, or rather their management or label, teased some kind of involvement with non-fungible tokens, NFTs.
Okay.
And the fans weren't happy. Not at all. It drew significant, pretty immediate fan criticism online. People pointed to what they saw as an inherent contradiction.
How so?
Well, a contradiction with the environmental themes that were so central to Plastic Beach, remember. Given the high energy consumption and the negative climate impact associated with the blockchain technology used for many NFTs back then.
Ah, right. So Gorillaz, the band that made an album about pollution, were getting involved in something seen as environmentally damaging.
Exactly. It felt like a betrayal of the narrative, of the band's own stated values to many fans. It's a key example, maybe, of where the commercial interests of the organization can potentially clash with the thematic core of its art.
Did they actually release any NFTs in the end?
No, they didn't. After the backlash, the plans seemed to be quietly dropped. No official Gorillaz NFTs were ever released.
Okay. So moving on to their latest phase, which arrived with the album Cracker Island in 2023.
Yeah. This time the promotional campaign used this kind of weird fictional cult called The Last Cult to tease and announce the album. Very Gorillaz.
And the sound of the album.
Critics generally described it as a refinement of their usual style, sort of consolidating their electronic pop and alternative influences. And it was produced by Greg Kurstin.
Oh, wow. Greg Kurstin. He's huge. Adele, Paul McCartney.
Exactly. Which really cemented their place within the sort of top tier of pop production landscape.
And collaborators. Still a big cast.
Still impressive, yeah. It brought in high-profile, very current features like Thundercat and Tame Impala.
Nice.
Alongside absolute classic rock royalty like Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac.
Stevie Nicks.
And a massive moment of global integration with the biggest streaming artist in the world, Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny on a Gorillaz track.
Yep. Apparently, the song Tormenta with Bad Bunny had actually been recorded by Albarn way back in 2021 when they were both in Jamaica. Shows how far ahead they plan these collaborations sometimes. The album also got a Grammy nomination for Best Alternative Music Album in 2024. Still relevant, still critically acclaimed.
And finally, looking ahead now, they're already laying the groundwork for their 25th anniversary and beyond, aren't they?
It seems like it. We just saw that House of Con exhibition in London in 2025.
Right. What was that about?
It was this immersive exhibition celebrating their history. And as part of it, they performed their first 3 albums in full, live, recontextualizing their own history for fans.
Cool.
And that exhibition culminated in this surprise mystery show on September 3rd, where they debuted an entire new album, live, 15 songs.
An entire new album. Already?
Yep. It's called The Mountain, and it's officially set for release in March 2026. The lead single is apparently called The Happy Dictator and features the band Sparks.
Sparks? Wow, that's a collaboration.
Isn't it? It just shows that the organization's collaborative capacity is still expanding, still surprising people. The model seems, well, almost immortal.
Okay, so let's try and wrap our heads around this. Part 4, the legacy and anatomy of the virtual band. If we step back from the timeline, what does this massive, sprawling body of work truly mean in terms of legacy?
Well, first off, Gorillaz is just impossible to categorize neatly, isn't it? It embodies this truly postmodern hybrid aesthetic.
The sources definitely confirm that difficulty. I mean, look at the genre tags they get slapped with. Alternative rock, electronic, trip hop, art pop, alternative hip hop, dark pop, rap rock, world beat.
It's everything. They blend everything. They are essentially a new genre defined by the absence of genre constraint.
AllMusic credits them specifically with blending Britpop and hip-hop, which were seen as almost opposing forces back in the late 90s.
Right.
But maybe more importantly, Pop Matters notes that their early work actually foreshadowed the way hip-hop, rock, and electronic elements would meld together in mainstream pop music, something that really exploded throughout the 2010s.
So they were defining the sound of the future, way before many of their peers caught up.
Seems like it. And their influences obviously reflect that incredibly broad scope.
Musically, you can hear bits of the moody atmosphere of Massive Attack, right?
Definitely. And the two-tone ska bounce of the Special.
Yeah, big influence.
The rhythmic eccentricity of Tom Tom Club. The lyrical depth and positive vibes of A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul.
And global stuff, too, like Fela Kuti. They combine British, American, and global influences just seamlessly.
And visually, the style is just this massive, loving tribute to decades of illustration and animation.
You can see the simplified, energetic forms of Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo vibe sometimes.
The anarchy of Looney Tunes. The satire of Mad Magazine.
And those sharp, detailed lines of European artists like Moebius and Ronald Searle. Hewlett wears his influences on his sleeve.
And the original idea itself, the virtual band concept, was inspired by things like those 1960s cartoon bands, the Archies.
Sugar, honey, honey.
Ah, yeah. And real bands who used fictional personas like the synth pop band ABC in the 80s.
But Jamie Hewlett pointed to something maybe more profound than just aesthetics when he talked about their legacy. He mentioned the educational impact.
Educational? How so?
He said Gorillaz' greatest achievement for him is its influence. He noted that a significant chunk of their audience are younger people who, through the cartoons and the music, end up discovering figures like Vlad the Impaler, or the artist Ronald Searle, or the whole history of a band like the Specials.
Ah, right. It's like stealth education, hiding inside this massive, cool pop product.
Exactly. The fictional narrative provides this context for genuine artistic discovery. It acts as a kind of gateway drug for musical and artistic history for a whole generation.
That's a great point. Okay, let's quickly drill down on the four main fictional members themselves, because their backstories are really intrinsically linked to the band's musical direction, aren't they? They aren't just mascots.
No, they're structural tools for Albarn and Hewlett. Start with Murdoch Nichols, the bassist.
The green guy.
He's positioned as the central, unpleasant villain of the band, inspired by figures ranging from Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones
Obvious parallel.
to Victor Frankenstein, even Creeper from Scooby-Doo, apparently. He's often depicted as an outright Satanist, wearing inverted crosses and stuff. His function is to introduce the chaos, the darkness, the narrative drive.
Okay. Then there's Russell Hobbs, the drummer. This is where the metafiction gets really interesting.
Yeah, Russell is essentially a representation of the band's core hip-hop and rap aspects, visually inspired by Ice Cube.
And his backstory. The possession thing.
Exactly. His fictional backstory is that he's possessed by the spirits of dead musicians who occasionally speak or rap through him. And that was the original narrative justification for the extensive use of collaborators on the Gorillaz albums.
Oh. It was a perfect built-in excuse for collaboration.
Totally. When Del the Funky Homo Sapien appeared on the debut album, rapping on Clint Eastwood...
He wasn't Del, he was Del the Ghost.
Exactly. Speaking through Russell. The fiction literally gave Albarn permission to work with anyone he wanted, and the character provided the in-universe explanation for the musical shift. Genius.
And Noodle, the lead guitarist.
Well, she replaced an earlier, more conventional guitarist character called Paula Cracker. Apparently, Albarn suggested Hewlett try something different.
And he came up with Noodle.
He redesigned the character as this 10-year-old Japanese girl, a martial arts expert who arrived at their studio in a FedEx crate. It immediately introduced this unique visual and narrative element, allowing the band to kind of travel globally in their stories and musical influences right from the start.
And finally, 2D, the lead vocalist, the frontman.
Whose singing voice is, of course, provided by Damon Albarn, which makes 2D the most direct emotional avatar for Albarn's songwriting within the band. He's the melancholic heart, often.
And we should also just reiterate the central, non-fictional role of Remy Kabaka Jr. again.
Absolutely. He started purely as Russell's voice actor and providing some percussion back in 2000. But he transitioned over the years to become an official credited member of the non-virtual creative team. He's listed as A&R producer in the credits for recent projects like the documentary Reject False Icons.
And that progression really demonstrates the evolution of the entire Gorillaz organization, doesn't it?
Yeah. The virtual members remain the necessary, enduring public face of the brand, but the key human contributors behind the scenes are gaining more official recognition as the organization expands and kind of formalizes its structure beyond just Albarn and Hewlett. Okay, so if we try to connect all these threads back to the bigger picture, Gorillaz' success, its legacy, it's not just about catchy tunes or cool visuals, is it?
No, I think it's fundamentally about creating this truly flexible, adaptive, and crucially non-human creative model.
Right. It's a high-concept shell that allows David Albarn to constantly refresh his musical identity, work with literally any musician alive, jump between genres.
Without being constrained by the expectations that get placed on a traditional aging human band. You know, oh, they don't sound like their old stuff.
Exactly. It is the ultimate vehicle for artistic freedom and potentially longevity. They can go from dub and trip-hop on the debut.
Yeah. Dorgark orchestral pop on Demon Days and Plastic Beach, then swing to electronic minimalism on the Now Now, and then completely adopt a dynamic TV season release model with Song Machine.
That kind of radical genre fluidity and rapid innovation is basically impossible for a fixed, traditional rock band. They're expected to maintain a consistent image, a consistent sound, appease a fan base with fixed expectations.
Gorillaz doesn't have that problem.
No.
They are an organization and ever-expanding creative universe. Which leads us, I guess, to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with.
Okay.
Considering the virtual band members don't age, they don't suffer from creative burnout in the same way, they don't demand bigger royalty checks.
Yeah.
The characters, that is obviously not the human creators.
Right, the fictional ones.
Is this virtual, malleable, fictional organization like Gorillaz actually the ultimate, perhaps even financially optimized and commercially resilient band model for the 21st century?
That's a big question. And if the primary artistic constraint the humans involved has been cleverly sidestepped or abstracted, what entirely new, maybe even synthetic genres might an entity like Gorillaz invent next? Where does it go from here?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a big one. The 100 Years' War.
Yeah, and that name itself is a bit tricky, isn't it? People hear 100 Years' War and think, 116 years solid fighting.
But it wasn't like that.
Not at all. It's really more of a historical label for this long, intermittent struggle. Lots of conflicts, big battles, sure, but also long truces, peace treaties that fell apart, and these massive external shocks. Officially 1337 to 1453.
Right. And the stakes. I mean, this wasn't just some minor border dispute.
Oh, absolutely not. This was existential, really. It was about who would control France. And back then, France was, well, the powerhouse of Western Europe. Richest, most populous kingdom.
So a massive prize, and it spanned generations, didn't it?
5 generations of kings, yeah. The English Plantagenets versus the French House of Valois. A deeply personal dynastic feud playing out over more than a century.
So our mission today, let's try and unpack those deep feudal roots. Look at the chaotic peaks like the Black Death and Henry V's campaign and see how it all reshaped Europe. Where do we even start? The fuse, I guess.
Yeah, the fuse. And that really starts with land, specifically the Duchy of Aquitaine down in southwestern France.
Yeah.
Gascony, Guyenne.
And this goes all the way back to 1066, the Norman Conquest.
Exactly. William the Conqueror wins England, but he's also Duke of Normandy. So the English king is a sovereign ruler in England.
But a vassal in France for whatever lands he holds there.
Right. And by 1337, those lands had shrunk, mostly just down to Gascony.
Right.
And that created this impossible situation. Edward III of England, a king.
Has to kneel to Philip VI of France for Gascony.
Precisely. It wasn't just about owning the land, it was about sovereignty, who had the final say.
Meaning French courts could overrule English decisions made in Gascony.
That's the nub of it. Imagine, a legal case starts in Bordeaux under English administration, it gets appealed, and ends up in Paris, in the French king's court. He could overturn the English king's justice in English territory.
Okay, yeah, that's untenable. You can't be both supreme ruler and subordinate for different parts of your realm without it causing friction.
It was a recipe for conflict, guaranteed.
So that's the long-term structural problem. But what lit the match in 1337? There was a succession crisis in France, wasn't there?
There was. Between 1316 and 1328, the main Capetian line died out. Charles IV died in 1328 with no sons.
And his closest male relative was?
His nephew, Edward III of England, through Charles's sister, Isabella, who was Edward's mother.
So by blood, Edward seems like the obvious heir. Why didn't he get the throne?
Well, the French nobility got creative with the law. They pointed to an earlier decision. Later people called it Salic law, basically saying women don't inherit the throne in France.
Okay.
But then they added a twist. They said, well, if Isabella couldn't inherit the throne herself,
then she couldn't pass that right to inherit on to her son, Edward.
Exactly. Clever, eh? So the throne went instead to a cousin on the male side, Philip of Valois, who became Philip VI.
So Edward's claim was blocked because it came through a woman.
That was the justification. Now, Edward, he initially accepted it, sort of, even paid homage to Philip for Gascony. but the relationship was just doomed.
And then Philip VI pushed too hard.
In 1337, yeah. He felt strong enough, maybe, and decided to confiscate Aquitaine. Claimed Edward wasn't fulfilling his duties as a vassal.
And that was the final straw for Edward.
That was it. Edward retaliated by formally reviving his claim to the French throne. He declared himself King of France, and the war was on. The feudal dispute became a full-blown war for the crown.
Okay, let's get into the fighting itself. The first phase, the Edwardian War, up to about 1360, this is where we see some really famous English victories.
Yeah, led by Edward III and his son, Edward the Black Prince. Legendary figures. And the battles. Crécy in 1346 is huge.
The longbow.
The longbow, absolutely devastating against the French knights. And the Poitiers in 1356, even more stunning perhaps. They actually captured the French king, John II.
Capturing the enemy king on the battlefield, that's a disaster for France.
It's a complete disaster. And strategically, something else happened around then, Calais.
Right, the capture of Calais in 1347. Why was that single port so important?
Location, location, location. Calais is right there on the Channel, northern France. It gave the English a secure foothold, a defensible port they could pour troops and supplies into whenever they wanted. It wasn't just a conquest, it was their bridgehead.
And they held on to it for centuries.
Until 1558, it was absolutely crucial for projecting English power onto the continent.
But things didn't always go England's way, even tactically. Tell us about Black Monday, 1360.
Black Monday. It's one of those moments that shows you just how unpredictable medieval campaigns were. Edward III's army is marching near Chartres. It's Easter Monday. And a freak storm hits. Out of nowhere. We're talking massive hailstones, lightning, a sudden brutal cold snap. Reports say over 1,000 English soldiers and camp followers died. Just like that. Hail and freezing temperatures.
Wow. An act of God literally halting an army.
The psychological shock was immense. Edward apparently took it as a sign. He immediately started negotiating, which led to the Treaty of Brittany.
Where he actually gave up his claim to the French throne for a while.
Temporarily, yes.
Yeah.
In return for getting full sovereignty over an expanded Aquitaine. But of course, the really big interruption wasn't weather.
The Black Death, arriving right in the middle of this period of 1347, 1351.
Yes. And you can't overstate its impact. It didn't just pause the war, it fundamentally ripped apart the society that was fighting it.
The death toll was just staggering.
Unimaginable. France might have lost half its population, maybe 20 million people. England lost, what, maybe a third, 20 to 33%.
So how does a pandemic of that scale change a war, beyond just fewer people to fight?
It shattered the economic basis of feudal warfare. Feudal armies relied on lords calling up their peasants, their retainers, often unpaid, or for minimal upkeep.
The feudal levy.
Right. But when the plague wipes out huge numbers of peasants, suddenly labor is scarce. It's valuable. Lords couldn't just demand service in the same way. The whole system of obligations started to break down.
So you can't rely on peasants for troops anymore.
Not nearly as easily. And this, I think, is crucial. It forced rulers, especially in France later on, to figure out how to pay for soldiers, how to hire professionals. It accelerated the shift away from feudal levies towards paid standing armies.
So the Black Death, in a grim way, helps create modern armies.
It's a major factor, yes. It created the conditions, the necessity for that change.
Okay, let's jump forward. Early 1400s, the Lancastrian phase. Henry V enters the picture.
And Henry V is ambitious. Very ambitious. And he looks across the channel and sees France in chaos.
What was happening in France?
Well, the French king, Charles VI, suffered from bouts of severe mental illness. He was often totally incapable of ruling. And on top of that, the French nobility was locked in a vicious civil war, the Armagnacs versus the Burgundians.
So, ripe for intervention.
Absolutely. Henry saw his chance. He lands an army, makes his claim, and this leads to 1415, Agincourt.
Another legendary English victory against the odds.
And utterly catastrophic for France. Not just the numbers killed, but who was killed. Something like 40% of the French nobility died or were captured that day.
That's not just losing a battle, that's losing your leadership class, your administrators, your commanders.
Exactly. It crippled the French state's ability to resist, and Henry V pressed his advantage ruthlessly.
Leading to the Treaty of Troy in 1420, this seems like the absolute peak of English success.
It really was. By this treaty, Henry V marries Charles VI's daughter, Catherine. But the kicker is, Henry's named heir to the French throne and regent of France.
And Charles VI's own son, the Dauphin.
Disinherited, declared illegitimate. The treaty basically handed France to the English crown upon Charles VI's death. It looked like the Plantagenet dream of a dual monarchy was finally real.
But it didn't last. Both Henry V and Charles VI died soon after, in 1422. The English still controlled much of northern France, but then the French revival begins.
It does, and it starts in a very unexpected way, with a figure who becomes central to French identity, Joan of Arc.
Just a teenage peasant girl, right? How did she make such a difference?
In 1429, she manages to convince the disinherited Dauphin, Charles, who's basically holding out in the south, to let her go to Orleans. The city was under siege by the English, a crucial strategic point.
And she believed she was sent by God.
She did. And crucially, the French soldiers started to believe it too. Her arrival, dressed in armor, it was an incredible morale boost. They saw her presence as a sign of divine favor.
And it worked.
It absolutely worked. The French attacked with renewed vigor, and the English were forced to lift the siege. It was a huge psychological blow to the English. They weren't invincible after all.
And that victory had a knock-on effects.
Immediately. It opened the way for another key French victory at Patay, and that cleared the path for Charles to travel deep into English-held territory.
To Reims.
To Reims Cathedral. The traditional place for crowning French kings. Charles VII was crowned there in July 1429.
Even though Joan herself was captured later and executed by the English in 1431.
Her impact was already made. The coronation at Reims cemented Charles VII's legitimacy. It undercut the Treaty of Troyes fundamentally. He was now the anointed King of France in the eyes of many French people.
But the English were still strong militarily. What was the final strategic turning point?
That probably comes at 1435. The Treaty of Arras. This is huge. The Duke of Burgundy, who had been allied with the English since before Agincourt,
switches sides,
abandons the English, makes peace with Charles VII. Losing the Burgundian alliance was devastating for the English in northern France. It made holding Normandy and Paris practically impossible long-term.
And the war grinds towards an end. But it doesn't just fade away. There's a final decisive battle. Castillon, 1453.
Castillon is significant. It marks the final loss of Gascony-Aquitaine for the English after centuries. But it's also significant for how it was won. Technology. Specifically, field artillery. The French, under Jean Bureau, had really invested in developing effective cannons. At Castillon, they set up fortified artillery positions. When the English commander Talbot charged,
they just got pounded by cannon fire.
Exactly. It shredded the English attack. Talbot was killed. It was a decisive demonstration that the age of the mounted knight was truly over and the age of gunpowder had begun. It marked the military end of the war.
So let's pull back 116 years of conflict, plague, upheaval. What's the lasting significance? What changed because of all this?
Well, militarily, it's transformative. The old feudal way of raising armies based on obligation, it collapses. Chivalry is a military code. It dies on those battlefields.
Replaced by
professionalism, paid soldiers, trained commanders, disciplined units. And this leads directly to something revolutionary for the time.
Standing armies.
The first permanent, professional, paid standing armies in Western Europe since Roman times. Charles V started it, but Charles VII really formalized it, with the Compagnies d'Ordonnance around 1445.
How big were these?
About 6,000 men initially. Paid by the crown, loyal to the crown, not some local lord. This is the beginning of the state's monopoly on military force.
And to pay for them, the French crown had to get much better at taxing its people consistently.
Absolutely. Permanent armies need permanent funding. That required building a centralized tax system, which massively strengthened the French monarchy.
And weapons technology. Artillery was key at the end.
Artillery became decisive. Castillon proved that. But you also saw the continued importance of specialized troops throughout the war. The English longbowmen were vital for decades, and things like the hobblers, fast, light cavalry for raiding, warfare became more complex, more specialized.
What about the political and social impact?
Huge. Even though it started as a dynastic squabble between cousins, the long war forged stronger national identities on both sides. People started seeing themselves more as French or English, rather than just subjects of a particular lord.
So nationalism gets a boost.
Definitely. And in France, despite all the destruction, the end result was a much more centralized state, with the king firmly in control.
And England? What was the fallout there?
England was broke. They'd poured fortunes into France for over a century, and in the end, lost everything except Calais. There was huge dissatisfaction among the nobility. All these soldiers came home with no employment.
No French lands to reward them with.
Right. All that investment, gone. All that ambition, thwarted. It created immense internal tension.
Which leads directly to
the Wars of Roses, beginning just 2 years after Castillon in 1455. The same nobles who fought in France turned on each other back home. The end of the Hundred Years' War directly sets the stage for England's own bloody civil war, a real domino effect.
What an incredible, complex story. We've seen the tangled roots in Gascony, the sheer disruption of the Black Death pushing military change, Henry V's near conquest, Joan of Arc turning the tide psychologically, and finally, this military revolution with artillery and standing armies reshaping the state itself.
Yeah, it really covers so much ground.
Yeah.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with. Think about what this long struggle did to the idea of a kingdom. It started with claims based on who your grandmother was, ancient feudal ties.
Right, bloodlines and inherited rights.
But by the end, especially in France, you see the emergence of something different. A kingdom defined more by a centralized government, funded by national taxes, defended by a national army, and maybe, just maybe, starting to be held together by a shared sense of national identity.
So the war itself helped create the very thing it was fought over, in a way.
In a way, yes. Which raises that fascinating question. At what point does a claim based on centuries-old inheritance like Edward III's become less important, less relevant than the emerging political will of a people starting to see themselves as a distinct nation?
That's a powerful question, and one whose echoes we can probably still hear today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we tackle these really big, complex theories, pull together the research, and basically try to give you the core insights fast. Today we're taking on, well, pretty much the entire human lifespan. We're trying to decode it using Eriksson's really remarkable psychoanalytic roadmap. Okay, so our mission here is simple: get you up to speed quickly but properly on Eriksson's stages of psychosocial development. And look, this isn't just, listing age ranges. It's about understanding those fundamental psychological and social conflicts, the crises that we all face throughout life. We're diving deep into the main 8 stages, plus that really important later addition, the 9th stage.
Yeah, and it's definitely a theory that deserves this kind of deep dive. Eriksson's work, which was expanded later on by his wife and collaborator, Joan Eriksson, was a huge step beyond classical Freudian psychoanalysis. Eriksson actually started out studying with Anna Freud, but he pretty quickly broadened the focus way beyond just psychosexual drives. Freud basically thought development was, well, mostly done by the time you hit adolescence.
Right, that was kind of it for Freud, wasn't it?
Pretty much. But Eriksson, he developed this post-Freudian theory focused on psychosocial development. He really stressed the ongoing dance between our inner psychological needs and, the demands and influences of our social world, our environment. And crucially, he saw this happening across the entire lifespan right up until we die.
And I think the idea that really hook you in, or at least it hooked me in, is that accumulative effect.
Right.
Like how you handle the conflict in one stage. The good stuff or the bad stuff left over, you carry that forward. It actually shapes how you tackle all the challenges that come next. It's like building a psychological foundation, layer by layer, your whole life.
Exactly. It's a cumulative process.
Okay, so let's really unpack this thing. Where should we start? Maybe with the basic mechanics, how these stages actually work. All right, so the whole structure rests on these 8 stages, or, well, eventually 9. And each one is defined by what Eriksson called a psychosocial crisis. Now, crisis sounds, pretty dramatic, like a total breakdown. But that's not quite what he meant, is it?
No, not exactly. Crisis here means more like a necessary turning point, a critical period of increased vulnerability and heightened potential. It's an unavoidable conflict that arises at each stage between 2 opposite forces.
Okay, 2 forces. What are they?
Well, on one hand, you've got an internal psychological need, maybe even a biological push. Something inside us is ready for a new step, like developing independence. And then on the other hand, you have the demands or the expectations coming from the outside, from society, culture, parents, teachers.
So like the toddler wants to do everything themselves.
Right. That's the internal push for autonomy.
But the parents need them to, not run into the street. So society puts limits. That tension is the crisis.
Precisely. That negotiation, that tension between the internal need and the external social reality, that defines the crisis of the stage.
Okay, so each stage presents this kind of tug-of-war, like trust versus mistrust.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier that seems key. The goal isn't to completely wipe out the negative side, like getting rid of all mistrust. That feels a bit weird. Why wouldn't we want that?
It's a really subtle but important point. A successful resolution isn't about eliminating the negative pole. It's about achieving a healthy balance that leans heavily towards the positive one. So, you favor trust over mistrust or autonomy over shame.
Why keep some mistrust, though?
Because, well, you need it. You can't navigate the real world safely if you're completely trusting of everything and everyone. You need a little bit of healthy skepticism, a capacity for mistrust, to recognize danger or untrustworthy situations. The aim is just for the positive quality trust, autonomy, initiative to be the dominant force, the default setting, if you like.
Okay, that makes sense. So you navigate the conflict, you find that positive balance. What's the payoff? What do you gain psychologically?
You acquire a specific basic strength, or, as it's often called, a virtue. This is an enduring psychological quality, like a tool, that helps you deal with the rest of your life.
Ah, okay. So for trust versus mistrust, if the baby develops that fundamental trust.
They gain the virtue of hope. And hope isn't just wishful thinking. It's this deep, enduring belief that your desires are achievable, that the world is fundamentally okay even when things get tough, and that hope then becomes the psychological bedrock for tackling all the later crises.
And if you don't resolve it well, if mistrust wins out.
Well, those challenges don't just vanish. Eriksson believed that unresolved conflicts tend to reappear later in life as ongoing problems. It makes successfully navigating the subsequent stages much harder because you're carrying that psychological baggage, that deficit.
Which brings us back to that lifespan perspective being so different from Freud. Freud basically thought your personality was set in childhood. But Eriksson's saying, no, development keeps going right. Even if you mess up a stage, you don't just get stuck there forever.
Exactly. You don't fail stage 3 and just stop developing. You move on through the life cycle, but you might carry, say, unresolved guilt from stage 3, which then impacts how you approach stage 4's challenge of industry versus inferiority and so on. And he had this really fascinating idea about time, too. He saw the stages as linear for each of us, birth to death, but for society, he saw it as circular.
Circular. How does that work? I'm trying to picture that.
Okay, think about the bookends of the lifespan. Stage 1. Trust versus mistrust in infancy. Stage 8. Integrity versus despair in late adulthood. Eriksson suggested that when an older person achieves ego integrity, they look back on their life with a sense of meaning, acceptance, peace.
Yeah.
That integrity actually serves as a model for the new generation, for the infants just starting out. It reinforces the baby's budding sense that life is trustworthy, that it has coherence and meaning, it fosters hope.
Wow. So the wisdom, or lack thereof, of the older generation directly impacts the foundational trust of the youngest.
That's the idea. Conversely, if the older generation is largely filled with despair, bitterness, regret, that feeling permeates the social environment, making it harder for infants to develop that basic trust. It makes the world feel less safe, less reliable.
So it's not just about my internal accumulation of virtues or deficits. It's also about this intergenerational feedback loop.
Exactly. And as you said, that very first virtue, hope, gained way back in infancy, it really does influence all the stages that follow. It sets the emotional tone for the entire journey.
It's like the seed crystal for everything else.
You could put it that way. Hope is that fundamental belief that things can work out, that your needs matter, even when you face setbacks. Without it, every later effort, trying new things, forming relationships, contributing to society, reflecting on your life, it's all going to be shadowed by a kind of basic pessimism or fear. The virtues build on each other.
Okay, let's trace that journey then. Let's get into the stages themselves, starting with those first 5, the ones that really build the foundation during childhood and adolescence. Stage 1, hope. Trust versus mistrust. This kicks off right at birth, goes up to about, 1 year old, maybe 18 months.
Roughly, yes, infancy.
And the baby is just completely dependent, right?
Yeah.
On caregivers, usually the mother initially, for everything: food, comfort, warmth, safety. So the crisis boils down to, can I rely on this world, these people, to take care of me? The big existential question is super basic. Can I trust the world?
And the answer really depends on the quality of that caregiving. If the caregivers are consistent, warm, reliable, they respond to the baby's needs predictably, offer comfort and security, then the infant develops basic trust.
It's not about getting everything instantly, though.
No, it's about reliability. Knowing someone will come, that needs will eventually be met, that consistent care leads to the virtue of hope, that feeling that, yeah, my needs matter, things can be okay.
And I can really see the connection here to other theories we've talked about, like Bowlby's and Ainsworth's attachment theory. That idea of a secure base, it sounds a lot like Eriksson's trust, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's a very strong parallel. That early attachment experience, whether it's secure or insecure, really echoes this trust versus mistrust dynamic and sets a pattern for future relationships.
Okay, but we said before you need a little bit of mistrust. Why would a 1-year-old need that? Seems like they should just feel totally safe.
Well, think about it. Life isn't always safe. A little bit of wariness helps them learn caution. Maybe it helps them discriminate between familiar, safe caregivers and potentially unsafe strangers, or recognize, obviously, dangerous things later on, like a hot stove. But the key is balance.
Right, so if that balance tips the wrong way, if care is inconsistent, neglectful, maybe abusive,
Then mistrust becomes the dominant force. The infant develops this pervasive sense of frustration, suspicion, anxiety, a feeling that the world is unreliable, maybe even hostile. And that lack of basic confidence can be a huge hurdle for forming close relationships later in life.
Okay, moving on quickly then. Stage 2, Will. Autonomy versus shame doubt. This is toddlerhood, right?
Yeah.
About 1.5, 2, maybe 3 years old. The famous terrible twos.
Exactly, often called the no phase or the me do it phase. The crisis here shifts. Now it's about gaining control. Control over their own bodies. Think toilet training, a classic example. But also developing motor skills, learning to walk confidently, feed themselves, maybe try to dress themselves.
Yeah, my nephew is right in this. Everything is I do it. So the question changes from can I trust the world to something more like, is it okay to be me, to be independent?
That's a great way to put it. Is it okay to assert my own will? And this is a really tricky stage for parents. Our sources really emphasize how crucial parental patience and encouragement are here. Well, if parents allow the child to try things, to explore, to make choices within safe limits, even if they mess up, spill their juice, put their shoes on the wrong feet, the child develops a sense of autonomy. That feeling of, I can do things, I am capable, I can handle problems.
And if the parents are too controlling, or maybe ridicule the child's attempts, like making fun of accidents during potty training.
That's where shame and doubt creep in. Shame is that awful feeling of being exposed, inadequate, judged. Doubt is that hesitation, that fear of trying, that feeling of, I can't really do this. Constant criticism or over-control really fosters those feelings.
It sounds like a real balancing act for parents. You mentioned sources highlighting the risks of extremes. Too much control leads to dependency or maybe later rebellion.
Right, or the child might become compulsively neat and rule-bound out of fear.
And too little control, just letting them run wild.
That could lead to impulsivity, recklessness, maybe a lack of consideration for others or for necessary rules later on. They need supported independence.
This is also where you see them start exploring their own interests, right? Like banging on pots and pans as music or getting obsessed with dinosaurs. They need that exploration validated to build that sense of self-efficacy, which leads to the virtue of will.
Will. So the determination to exercise free choice and self-control.
Exactly. Okay, next stage. Stage 3, purpose. Initiative versus guilt. This is the preschool or play age, roughly ages 3 to 5, maybe 6. The child has got some basic bodily control now, and they're ready to take on the world in a more purposeful way.
How does that look different from the toddler stage?
They're not just asserting me do it. They're starting to plan things, undertake activities with a goal in mind. They're learning more complex skills, maybe helping with simple chores, learning to count or tie their shoes, figuring out basic concepts like gravity because things fall down when you drop them. Play becomes much more imaginative and role-based. So the existential question expands again. Now it's like, is it okay for me to do things, to move, to act on my ideas?
Precisely. Is it okay for me to make things happen? You see the surge of energy, wanting to initiate projects, ask endless why questions, explore, maybe even take some risks, and they might pretend to be a doctor, build a fort, organize a game.
And if this initiative is encouraged, if they're allowed to explore and try things out,
then they develop the virtue of purpose. This is the courage to imagine and pursue valued goals, to feel like their actions have meaning. But the opposing force here is guilt.
Guilt. That sounds like a heavy one for a 4-year-old. What kind of guilt?
It's often a new and confusing feeling for them. It might be guilt over things that don't seem logical, like feeling bad about aggressive thoughts or fantasies, or feeling guilty just for asserting their will if it clashes with the parent's wishes. This is partly because they're starting to internalize rules and moral standards from their parents. It's the beginning of conscience, really.
So if their attempts at initiative are constantly shut down, if parents are dismissive, overly critical, or make them feel like their plans or questions are silly or annoying,
Then that pervasive sense of guilt takes root. They might become afraid to try new things, overly anxious about doing something wrong, or perhaps swing the other way and become overly aggressive or defiant out of frustration because their natural drive is being blocked. You might see them trying to test boundaries, like trying to cross a street alone, which involves learning self-limits, or lashing out physically if their plans are thwarted.
Okay, that makes sense. This really sets them up for the next big shift, doesn't it? Moving into the wider world of school.
Absolutely. Which brings us to stage 4, competence. Industry versus inferiority. This covers middle childhood, the school years, say from age 6 up to puberty, around 11 or 12. Now they're entering the structured world of school, peers, learning formal skills.
So the crisis shifts again. It's not just about me and my plans anymore. It's about how I measure up in the world of people and things, right? The question becomes, can I make it out here? Can I do things as well as others?
Exactly. School and peer interactions become incredibly important arenas for comparison. The focus is on learning the skills valued by society: reading, writing, math, teamwork in sports, following rules in games. It's about producing things, completing tasks.
So if the child is encouraged, if their efforts are praised, maybe for a drawing, for solving a problem, for helping out, what happens then?
They develop a sense of industry, which leads to the virtue of competence. This is the feeling that they can master skills, that they can make things and complete tasks successfully. It builds self-confidence, diligence, perseverance. They learn the pleasure of work, essentially.
And the dark side, inferiority.
That comes from repeated failure or constant criticism or feeling like they just can't meet the expectations of teachers, parents, or especially peers. If they consistently feel less capable than others, they develop feelings of inferiority.
What does that look like?
According to Eriksson, it can lead to things like low self-esteem, apathy, a reluctance to try new challenges. They might feel like there's no point in trying because they'll just fail anyway. Maybe they withdraw or become, as the source material puts it, that couch potato, just lacking engagement. This stage is so critical for discovering talents too, joining the band, playing sports, finding out you're good at math, or feeling like you don't measure up anywhere.
Wow. Okay, that leads us right into the storm of adolescence.
Indeed. Stage 5, fidelity. Identity versus role confusion. This is adolescence, roughly ages 12 to 18, but Eriksson himself acknowledged the stage could stretch much longer, especially in complex modern societies.
This feels like the big one everyone talks about, the transition from childhood to adulthood. They're suddenly super aware of how others see them, and they're trying to figure out who they are deep down and where they fit in. The existential question is huge. Who am I, and who can I be?
Absolutely. This is the stage where Eriksson coined the term identity crisis. And he saw it not as a bad thing, but as a necessary turning point. It's this intense period of cracking to integrate everything, the physical changes of puberty, their developing personality, their skills from the previous stage, past experiences and future possibilities into a coherent sense of self.
What are the key areas they need to figure out?
Eriksson highlighted several: finding a vocational path, what kind of work might I do, figuring out their stance on politics and religion, understanding their gender role and sexuality, and basically reconciling the person they feel they are inside with the person society expects or allows them to be.
That sounds incredibly challenging. Our sources mentioned Eriksson's idea of a psychosocial moratorium. What's that about?
It's basically society giving teenagers a bit of breathing room, a timeout period to experiment, trying on different roles, beliefs, styles, relationships without having to make lifelong commitments immediately. Think gap years, trying different college majors, exploring various social groups. It's a sanctioned period to find yourself.
And in societies where that's not really allowed, or for individuals who feel rushed.
It can make resolving the identity crisis much harder. The complexity of modern life with so many choices can also prolong this stage, sometimes well into the 20s or even 30s for some people.
So what's the positive outcome if they navigate this successfully?
They achieve a stable and integrated sense of identity, and this leads to the virtue of fidelity. Fidelity isn't just loyalty, it's the ability to be true to yourself and to make and sustain commitments to others, to ideals, to causes, even when things get complicated or values clash. It's about being reliable because you know who you are.
The negative outcome, role confusion.
That's when they just can't pull it all together. They have a fragmented sense of self, feel unsure about their place in the world, maybe drift from one thing to another without commitment, or sometimes even adopt a negative identity like defining themselves by what they aren't or are against. It can lead to withdrawal or difficulty forming connections later.
Okay, before we jump into the adult stages, it's worth pausing here. For anyone listening, think about it. According to this model, You've already navigated these 5 crucial stages. The hope, will, purpose, competence, and fidelity you developed or struggled with before you were even 18, they're the psychological toolkit you're using right now to face the challenges of adult life.
That's a really important point. How well those foundations were built profoundly impacts everything that comes next.
All right, let's move into the adult years. The focus seems to shift here, doesn't it? Less about defining who I am and more about sharing that self, contributing, and eventually looking back on it all. Stage 6, love, intimacy versus isolation. This covers early adulthood, roughly 18 to maybe 39 years old. So you've hopefully figured out your identity in stage 5. Now what?
Now you're developmentally ready, Eriksson argued, to fuse your identity with someone else's without fearing that you'll lose yourself in the process. The crisis is about forming deep, meaningful, committed relationships. It's about intimacy. The existential question is, can I unite myself with another person?
And intimacy here means more than just romance or sex, right?
Oh, much more. While it definitely includes finding a life partner for many, it also encompasses deep friendships, close family ties, any relationship characterized by mutual trust, reciprocity, vulnerability, and commitment. Successfully navigating this leads to the virtue of love. And for Eriksson, love is this capacity for mutual devotion, a fusion of identities that enhances both people.
What happens if you can't achieve that?
Yeah.
If you don't form those bonds?
The negative outcome is isolation. And this isn't just being physically alone. It's a psychological state, feeling alienated, disconnected, lonely, often stemming from a fear of commitment, a fear of being hurt, or perhaps an inability to compromise one's own identity, which might not have been fully solidified in stage 5.
That sounds painful. Our sources also mentioned something Eriksson called distantiation. How does that fit in?
Distantiation is almost like a defense mechanism against the threat of intimacy or against people who seem different or dangerous to one's own fragile identity. If you're struggling with isolation, you might feel the need to push people away, to stereotype them, even to feel hostile towards groups or ideas that challenge you. It's the readiness to isolate or even destroy forces or people whose presence feels threatening. It comes from that pain and fear associated with failed intimacy.
And there's research backing this up, right? That link between stage 5 and 6.
Yes. James Marcia's work, which we'll touch on later maybe, provided empirical support showing that adolescents who achieved a clearer sense of identity were indeed much better equipped to form successful, intimate relationships in early adulthood. It really highlights that sequential building block nature of the theory.
Okay, so after finding love and connection, where do we go next?
Into the heart of adult life. Stage 7. Care. Generativity versus stagnation. This is middle adulthood, let's say roughly 40 to 64. The focus shifts outward again, quite dramatically. It's less about me and my partner and more about what am I contributing to the world, to the future. The big question becomes, can I make my life count? Can I guide the next generation?
Generativity. That sounds like generating things.
Exactly. It's about establishing and guiding the next generation. Most obviously, this happens through raising children. But Eriksson was clear it's broader than that. It can be expressed through productive and meaningful work, creativity, teaching, mentoring, community involvement, activism, anything that contributes positively to society and leaves something of value behind.
And the virtue here is care.
Yes. Care. A widening concern for others, for the future, for the world you're going to leave behind. It's moving beyond self-interest.
This is where Eriksson had that really interesting insight. That is not just kids needing adults, but adults actually need children, or at least engagement with the younger generation, to fully mature themselves.
He did argue that. Guiding the next generation forces you to confront your own values, your legacy. It's a crucial part of becoming a fully realized adult.
So what happens if someone doesn't find ways to be generative? If they turn inward instead?
They risk falling into stagnation. This is feeling unproductive, disconnected, self-absorbed, maybe bored or cynical. They might feel stuck, like their life lacks meaning. Sometimes this manifests as that classic midlife crisis, maybe trying desperately to recapture youth instead of embracing the generative role of middle age. It's a kind of psychological standstill.
And the sources pointed out this stage involves some really complex tasks beyond just work or kids.
Oh, absolutely. Middle adulthood is demanding. You're often juggling multiple roles, achieving mature civic and social responsibility, maintaining your partnership, finding new ways to express love, often dealing with aging parents, maybe even reversing roles and caring for them, while also launching your own children into independence and trying to step back from being the center of their lives. It's a huge amount to manage.
That definitely sets the scene for the final act.
It does. Stage 8. Wisdom. Ego integrity versus despair. This is late adulthood, 65 onwards. Retirement often happens here. Productivity naturally slows down. The primary task becomes reflection, looking back over the whole sweep of life. The crisis is an internal evaluation. Was my life meaningful? Am I okay with the person I became? The ultimate question. Is it okay to have been me?
Ego integrity, what does that feel like?
It's a sense of wholeness, of acceptance, looking back and feeling that your life, with all its ups and downs, successes and failures, made sense, had meaning. It's accepting your one and only life cycle as something that had to be and that, by necessity, permitted no substitutions. This acceptance brings the virtue of wisdom.
Wisdom, not just knowledge, but...
More like a detached yet active concern with life itself. In the face of death itself. It brings a sense of peace, perspective, and allows one to face death without terror.
And the alternative? Despair.
Despair is the feeling that time is too short now, too short to start another life, too short to find alternative roads to integrity. It's looking back with significant regret, bitterness, feeling that life was wasted or unproductive. This often manifests as hopelessness, depression, perhaps a fear of death because life feels incomplete or unfulfilled. They might obsess over past mistakes or perceived wrongs done to them.
And Eriksson beautifully ties this last stage back to the very first one, doesn't he? That idea of closing the circle.
He does. The integrity achieved by the older adult provides, as we discussed, a crucial foundation of hope and trust for the newest generation. It shows that a life lived fully can end in peace, not terror.
So the older person's wisdom nurtures the infant's hope.
Exactly. And we also see echoes of earlier stages here in late life. For example, as physical abilities decline, that old struggle for autonomy from stage 2 often resurfaces. The strong desire to remain independent, to not be reliant on others, can become a major preoccupation. And it's important to note, this stage's crisis can sometimes be triggered earlier, say by a terminal illness diagnosis, forcing that life review prematurely.
Okay, so for decades, that was the model, 8 stages. But then, as people started living longer and longer into their 80s and 90s, Eriksson's wife, Joan, felt something was missing.
That's right. Joan Eriksson, who was a crucial collaborator throughout Erik's career, felt that the challenges faced in very late old age, which she called the 90s and beyond, weren't fully captured by Stage 8. She wrote about this in the extended version of The Life Cycle Completed, which she published when she herself was 93.
So she added a 9th stage. What defined this final stage?
She recognized that the sheer weight of physical decline, the increasing dependency, the loss of contemporaries, the shrinking world, these create a unique set of psychological demands. The mechanism she proposed is really quite striking and, honestly, a bit sobering.
How does it work?
Instead of a completely new crisis, she suggested that in this 9th stage, the crises of the first 8 stages are revisited, but with the negative pole, the dystonic aspect like mistrust, shame, guilt, inferiority becoming dominant, even for people who had successfully resolved those stages positively much earlier in life. It's like a psychological reversal driven by physiological decline.
Wow. Can you give some examples of how that plays out?
Sure. Take stage 1, trust versus mistrust. The very old person, who may have developed basic trust decades ago, now faces profound reasons to mistrust their own body. It becomes unreliable, failing senses, memory lapses, risk of falls, incontinence. They have to learn a new kind of mistrust, directed inward at their own failing capabilities.
That sounds incredibly difficult. What about stage 2, autonomy versus shamed out?
That hard-won autonomy of toddlerhood gets reversed. The loss of physical control, needing help with basic tasks like dressing or bathing, can bring back intense feelings of shame and doubt about their ability to function independently. It's facing the indignity of dependency.
And stage 4, industry versus inferiority.
The competence and industry they built through their working lives often fades. Joan Eriksson wrote that feeling incompetent due to aging can be deeply belittling, making elders feel like unhappy small children of great age, echoing that earlier vulnerability to inferiority.
And I assume this culminates in the final stage, integrity versus despair.
Yes, she suggested that the peaceful retrospection associated with integrity often gets overshadowed in the 9th stage by a more pressing focus on immediate losses, physical disintegration, and the narrowing of possibilities. Despair can unfortunately gain the upper hand as capabilities diminish. Similarly, isolation might intensify as peers die off, and physical limitations make social connection harder, challenging the intimacy achieved earlier.
That paints a pretty bleak picture of extreme old age. Did she offer any hope within that?
She did, thankfully. Despite this difficult reversal of the earlier crises, Joan Eriksson believed that the fundamental basic trust established way back in infancy could still persist, even if buried deep. That core sense that life fundamentally is okay could provide a final source of strength and resilience, a flicker of hope even amidst the losses.
It's a powerful addition, really acknowledging the unique struggles of very late life. Okay, so we have this comprehensive 9-stage model. But like any major theory, it's faced criticism, right? We need to look at that impartially.
Absolutely. No theory is perfect.
Yeah.
One of the most significant criticisms is potential cultural bias. Eriksson developed his theory based largely on observations within Western, specifically European and American contexts, often focusing on male development in the mid-20th century.
So does it apply universally?
That's the question. Critics argue that the sequence, the specific crises, and particularly the virtues emphasized, like individual identity, achievement, and adolescence, might not map neatly onto experiences in non-Western, more collectivist cultures, where identity might be more defined by group membership or family roles than individual striving.
What of the sequence? Does everyone have to go through these in lockstep order? People seem to experience these things differently.
That's another common critique. Do you really have to resolve identity before you can tackle intimacy? We all know people who seem to manage both concurrently or maybe prioritize relationships before their career is fully set. Eriksson's response generally was that while the stages represent the normative sequence, the conflicts themselves are present throughout life to some degree, just that one conflict becomes the central developmental task during a particular period.
So the identity versus role confusion tension might be strongest in adolescence, but it can definitely pop up again later in life.
Exactly. Like during a midlife career change or after retirement, he saw the stages as focal points, not rigid boxes.
Another critique, often aimed at broad psychoanalytic theories, is that they're great at describing what happens, but maybe less clear on how or why.
That's fair. The theory is very insightful descriptively, outlining the crises and virtues. But it can be somewhat vague on the specific mechanisms of change. What exactly does a person need to do to move from, say, stagnation to generativity? What specific experiences trigger the successful resolution of a crisis? The theory doesn't always provide a detailed process map for that transition.
But despite these criticisms, there is evidence supporting parts of their theory, isn't there?
Yeah.
Particularly that cumulative aspect.
Yes, there is. The work of researchers like James Marcia, who developed the identity statuses based on Eriksson's stage 5, provided significant empirical backing. Marcia found clear correlations. Adolescents who explored options and made commitments, achieved identity, were demonstrably better adjusted and more capable of forming genuine intimate relationships, stage 6, than those who were still confused, hadn't explored, or just adopted identities given to them.
So that lends real weight to the idea that resolving one stage successfully does prepare you for the next one.
It strongly suggests that sequential, cumulative aspect holds true, at least for the transition from adolescence to early adulthood in the cultures studied. #outro project.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. We've journeyed right through the human lifespan, from that absolute dependence and need for trust in infancy, through the intense search for identity, the drive to connect and contribute, all the way to the final reflections on a life lived, guided by Erik and Joan Eriksson's stages. It really is an incredibly comprehensive way to think about our psychological journey.
It really is. And I think, the enduring value here isn't about rigidly slotting yourself or others into boxes. It's more about the framework, the lens it gives you. It helps make sense of why certain challenges feel so big at different times in life. It lets you see your current struggles maybe not just as isolated problems, but potentially as echoes of earlier unresolved issues or as preparation for what's coming next. It really highlights how those early experiences, getting enough hope, will, purpose, genuinely keep influencing your ability to find love or care decades down the line.
And that discussion of the 9th stage, wow. It's a stark reminder that development, or maybe adaptation, doesn't stop until life itself stops. And it often means grappling again with those very first conflicts, but under much harder circumstances. So here's something to think about as we wrap up. If that final stage, achieving integrity, requires looking back and feeling it was okay to have been me, which of these 9 core tensions, these fundamental psychosocial crises, do you feel is most active in your life right now? Is there a virtue from an earlier stage that feels a bit shaky, that might need some attention to help you build towards that final acceptance? What really stands out to you about the challenge Eriksson identified for your current stage of life?